Senior SARS employees Mr Pillay and Pete Richer were at the Labour Court fighting against their suspension by the tax agency. In a surprising turn of events, Mr Richer's suspension was withdrawn, but Mr Pillay's remains outstanding. Our reporter Mbongeni Mutwa has been at the Labour Court all morning. Mbongeni, a dramatic day at the Labour Court. What transpired in the SARS case?
Well, it was very interesting. The case, first of all, this is not a joint application. So Mr. Richer has brought his own application, obviously fighting the suspension, and Mr. Pillay also his own separate one. And when the case was called up to be heard at around 10:30 or so, the lawyers for the two gentlemen asked for the matter to be stood down while they were busy consulting with SARS lawyers. And a couple of hours later, we heard that SARS had lifted Mr. Richer's suspension. They had issued a letter to that effect, and they had agreed to pay for his lawyer's costs. But the matter of Mr. Pillay is going ahead. In fact, his lawyer has just begun arguing the case right now, and he says that the manner that Mr. Pillay was suspended was unprocedural, and it was also unlawful. He's just about to finish his argument, and now we wait to hear from the lawyer for SARS.
Mbongeni, do we know on what basis Mr. Richer's suspension was lifted?
We don't know. I spoke to the lawyer. He said there were no reasons given for the lifting of suspension. He also said there had been no reasons given when the gentlemen were suspended 2 weeks ago. So we don't know that, but the interesting thing also is that Mr. Richer has not left. You know, he has remained in court, keenly awaiting, like everyone else, to hear the matter of Mr. Pillay.
Now, Mbongeni, were you able to speak to either gentleman, and on what basis is Mr. Pillay challenging his suspension?
Well, Mr. Pillay, his lawyer in his argument said, in terms of this SARS employment policy and the contract the contract of employment, it states clearly the steps that need to be followed in case someone is suspended. First, he says it's clear in the policy that the person must be notified of the intention to suspend them, and they must be given a hearing, given a chance to state their case as to why they should not be suspended. And he has cited correspondence between Mr. Pillay and the SARS commissioner, suggesting that the SARS commissioner did not and was not willing to offer Mr. Pillay the opportunity to state his case. Even despite that, he says Mr. Pillay wrote a 34-letter representation to the commissioner as to why he should not be suspended, and the commissioner responded in writing, saying that he had not read that 34-page representation, and he was not willing to read it. So that seems to be the main argument at this point. Of course, the two gentlemen have already approached the CCMA, I think a couple of days ago, where they are also going to try to get the CCMA to set aside their suspensions. That hearing of the CCMA is only expected to begin early next year, being already mid to late December now. So they want the Labour Court to grant an interim order lifting the suspensions until the matter is heard and finalized by the CCMA. Of course, as we speak now, Mr. Richer's suspension has been lifted. Now it's Mr. Pillay that everyone is waiting to see what's going to happen.
All right, Mbongeni, thank you very much for that update. I'm sure he'll have more information for us in the later bulletins. That was our reporter Mbongeni Mutwa at the Labour Court.